Yay!
Cheers, man.
How's it going, Alex?
Yeah, good, man. Good. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Actually, I'm just getting ready to head down to Texas to play a birthday show with this rapper slash singer Candisha, who I've
Nice.
done many tracks with, but never actually met in real life. So
No way. Oh, sick.
play
That'll be loads of fun.
yeah,
Whereabouts in Texas?
it's near Dallas.
Okay.
Yeah, so that'll be cool. I'm gonna go hang with
Nice.
my homie Metronome, who's like a YouTube finger drummer dude, and
Sick.
we're gonna do some finger drumming. And then, go out to the,
Sounds like a fun trip.
yeah, I'm really excited for it. It's gonna be good, and it's
Yeah, fuck yeah, man.
birthday gig, so that's always fun.
Yeah, good shit.
Yeah, you've got a good job when your idea of a good birthday is doing your actual job.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah. Like electing to do it for fun on your birthday just because you love it anyway, you know? Yeah, man. No, fully.
I mean, I remember a while ago I was having a birthday with some friends in San Francisco, and for my kind of recreational thing that I was doing, I was tending the bar, and then my friend who was a bartender was DJing. And I was
Nice.
like, oh, we traded jobs.
Yeah.
It's fun now.
Let's do each other's for fun, you know, why not? Let's see what the hype's all about.
Yeah, good times, good times. How are you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Just sort of chipping away at music and life generally, as always. Like, just trying to plumb the depths of weird sound design goodness, and then yeah, just hanging out with my daughter in between, which is great. She's like 10 months old now, so it's all still pretty fresh, but like, yeah, a lot of fun, man. Thanks, man. Thanks. Yeah. So I've been pretty like wrapped up in that for the last, almost a year, I guess. But
Good time.
yeah, life's good,
though.
man. Yeah, life's good, man. Yeah, I mean that was kind of the thought, it's like, she was born January this year. I was like, I'm not going anywhere for like, a while, or January. Sorry, she was born September last year, so it's like I'm not going anywhere for like a while, right? So might as well just do that now.
Yeah.
And it's been amazing, man. It's been amazing. Such a trip.
Yeah, I always thought that like having a child was going to be the end of my music career, and I'd just be like, it would just be this constant burden, and I wouldn't be able to have any fun anymore and everything.
Yeah.
Ironically, having a kid was actually what has taken my music to a whole other level that I didn't ever think I would achieve, because now it's like I'm not just doing it for fame or whatever. It's like I'm doing it for her. That's how I support my child. So I take it so much more seriously, and like I got sober and everything, and it's just like
it changes your like motivations, of like why you're doing it in a way that actually is really healthy. Because I mean, I think, to be honest, if like the whole pandemic experience showed me one thing, it's like it's not really just enough to just be doing it for myself. Because as soon as I didn't really have the opportunity to go out and play music and do all of these things that I really enjoyed, I was like, oh fuck, my motivation has just disappeared completely, and actually it came back when I found out we were having a kid, so because all of a sudden I'm like, oh, now I can see the future, and I'm like, feel like I want to make music for that future, you know what I mean? So yeah, it kind of changes your perspective in a lot of really awesome ways, and like, yeah, okay, there's less time for like fucking around, but that's not such a bad thing anyway.
no.
My use of time is like razor sharp now,
Short deadlines, quick turnarounds, man.
Yeah, that's it, man. That's it. So I mean, like this EP actually that we're going to be like checking out today was pretty much entirely written like, since she's been born, basically, and like mostly like sat in the studio with like a baby monitor underneath my screen, watching to see whether she's going to wake up and I need to go do something or whatever.
Like reverse live streaming.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Baby live stream, so yeah, that's kind of nice. I think that I'm sure, it definitely feeds into it. It feeds into what the music is about for me, at least personally. You know what I mean?
Hell yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, I think, for our viewers and listeners here, we should probably start by giving a brief synopsis of your fabulous Seppa project. So why don't you give us like a brief history of Seppa?
So I think it's been about, I want to say about 6 years now that I've been making music as Seppa, but I was making music for like many years before that as well. and like I just kind of needed to switch the name, and actually ended up being kind of like a good thing, because it was kind of like a bit of a fresh start in some respects. Like you kind of carry over all the skills I already had, but like, you know, I got to like reimagine what I was doing a little bit, which is super cool. And then like maybe I want to say maybe like a year and a half after I started doing that, maybe a little bit more, we started Slugwife with, it was like me and Cursor and Finn. So yeah, and that was just like a label that was kind of born out of like, you know, just being frustrated with labels being like, you know, giving people terrible deals and all that kind of stuff. And we were like, well, you know, with all these options like Bandcamp and stuff now, like, and everything being totally online, like we don't need to be taking like half of people's money when we are definitely not doing half of the work. And I don't think any label really is, you know, that kind of thing. So we just kind of like built it, I guess, in a bit more of a DIY way to be the thing that we wanted it to be. So yeah, and then that kind of like led on into like there'd always been kind of an audience in North America, but that just kind of like expanded a lot with Slugwife, and allowed us to just sort of like push us and like, you know, the other kind of like main people on the label, like Lone Drum and Mike Wallace, KLO, you know, got Rezo involved, and
love Rezo so much.
You know, Chalky and like, you know, there's a whole host of awesome people that are like involved like regularly with the label, and it allowed us to just kind of like lift everybody up to a point where we could actually start living off our music a bit more, which was great. So yeah, so it's been a pretty cool ride. I mean, you know, I've been very fortunate to be able to travel and play my own music that I make to crowds of people that want to hear it. You know, I'm super grateful all the time. Grateful that I get to sort of like, you know, DIY it as well, so I don't have anybody telling me what I should and shouldn't be doing, and you know, it's totally up to me what my creative direction is, and I kind of intentionally keep it as like scattershot as I like possibly can.
Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, and kind of like, you know, I think I've done a good few EPs, like 4 albums at this point, 2 solo, 2 with Chalky that are kind of more like kind of jazz albums. And then yeah, singles, stuff on compilations, just like, you know, it's just busy. I mean, the thing I love to do the most is make music. So you know, it's just my outlet for whatever my brain is like spitting out that day, week, month, whatever. Yeah, so I guess that kind of sums it up, really.
Very cool. Well, the Seppa project is always welcome in my ear holes, friend. Love it.
Thank you very much.
You know, you mentioned your scattershot approach, and I find that kind of interesting because generally, you know, like let's say you're a young upcoming artist and you get signed to some kind of a management company. The typical approach, which is based on kind of like blowing up an artist short term, is like, okay, let's cut off all of your loose edges and fit you into a very defined, branded micro genre that you can like be the person for, and then we're gonna like carve out this beachhead with this like very defined brand, which is excellent strategy in the short term, I find, but over time, you know, especially if you've got one real hit in that micro genre, you kind of end up in a situation where you just end up making worse versions of that same sound, trying to recapture whatever that magic was that got you your first hit, and then people get sick of it and move on. It's a bit frustrating. So I like hearing that you take this scattershot approach, but I would also like to know a little bit more about like what your creative intentions are specifically with the Seppa project. Like what are you trying to do artistically? What kind of an experience are you trying to create? What kind of emotions are you trying to convey? What sorts of, how do you want people to feel? Where is it appropriate to listen to your music? That sort of thing. If you could just go into that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I've always tried to make, music to sort of fulfill a broad range of like emotional interests, I suppose. Like, because I think that like day after day, you never feel the same day. It's the same way, like one day to the next, one week to the next, whatever, and even like sometimes, you get to like a year later and you look back on something that you loved and it like doesn't feel so like you just don't connect to it in the same way, so I've always felt like it's important to really like, I don't know, just just try and express the nuances of how I'm feeling a little bit. And even though I'm making like electronic dance music, which is kind of often seen as being like maybe a more like, it's either high energy or there's no point kind of thing, or something that's a bit more of a throwaway, which kind of connects back to what you were talking about a little bit. I think there is so much potential for it to be like deeply emotive music, and so I've always kind of wanted to explore that, and kind of find like, I guess, kind of find ways of making music that is both like heavy and sound system appropriate and like exciting for parties and stuff like that, but like can really like touch people in some way that actually has some like, bigger meaning to them than it just being like, oh, this is really exciting right now, so yeah, I kind of, I mean, also, it's quite informed and always has been by like psychedelic experiences as well, which like are not something that I do often, but like I don't think you really need to. I think it's like there's a sort of like a depth of like lived experience that you can find through that I've always tried to like express in some way, and it's kind of like hard to describe because it's inherently like indescribable thing. It's that's something you just have to experience. But yeah, I feel like there's a lot that I learned from those experiences that I try and like channel into the music that I make, in terms of how all the different pieces fit together and how it moves through time, I suppose. That's always something that I'm kind of thinking about as well.
So can you think back to like a specific moment or experience that you had that made you be like, this is what I need to express?
Yeah. I think it was, how old would I have been? 19 or 20. First trip, and listening to a guy called Wagga Wagga. I don't know whether you're familiar with his music.
I'll have to.
Right.
So is it WAGA or?
Yeah, so he did a couple of albums way back in like, so yeah, I guess it would have been early 20s. It was like 2008, 2009, something like that. There's one called Merepsican. I fucking don't know how to spell that. Merepiscan, I think. And a few other bits that he did that just were like kind of pushing the boat out of like, okay, let's not make bass music just like the same sort of 2-drop formula every time, or just use like a very tight like set of genre elements or whatever. It was kind of like pulling in elements from loads of different stuff or whatever. And the music that he makes now is quite different, but like, yeah, it was just the combination of those things where I was like, it's sort of like you're like, oh, I've just been listening to music in like this like 2-dimensional way, and now it's like 3-dimensional kind of thing.
So were you at home? Were you seeing him live?
Yeah.
Were you? Yeah.
No, it was at home. Yeah, it was at home. It was me and a good friend of mine. And yeah, we were just like, what do we do? Oh, let's stick on this album that seems kind of cool. And it's just like, oh man, this is like totally changed my like perspective on what I'm doing, because I'd already been making electronic music for a while by that point. I'd been playing instruments in bands and stuff for like a really long time. So, I'd already been doing a lot of music stuff, but yeah, I don't know. It changed my idea, especially in the way that like sub bass kind of like the effect that sub bass can have, and how that can add so much depth to your music. Even though I'd like already been out and seen sound systems and kind of experienced it a bit and stuff, but yeah, it was kind of, yeah, that to me is always the thing where I'm like, oh yeah, that just kind of like fused like a shitload of new connections in my brain that are just like, thankfully still there now, and kind of changed the way, like once you hear music in a certain way like that, you just can't really unhear that, and I wouldn't want to either,
Have you told Wagga Wagga about this?
Yeah, we've like, I haven't seen him for quite a few years actually, but yeah, we lived together for a few years in the end,
and
stuff like.
That's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah, definitely, man. Yeah, he's a good guy.
Cool.
Yeah, and I think we booked him a couple of times.
Wagga.
Yeah, wherever he is now, somewhere in like Southeast Asia, making like dragon fruit cider, I think was like the last thing I heard. So
There's worse places to end up.
I know, right? Yeah. So yeah, that's definitely one of them. I think also, I mean, I think the first time I went to, have you heard of a festival called the Bangface Weekender?
Oh yeah, I would love to go to Bangface, man. That looks so fun.
You should go, definitely. Yeah, it's just a wicked. I mean, it's like nominally like a breakcore festival, but I mean, they have like all kinds of stuff, and like
I love breakcore personally.
Yeah.
So
Oh man, same. I mean,
totally
it was
cool with that.
breakcore. When I kind of got into all this stuff, it was like breakcore and dubstep, which at the time the
Yeah,
two
there was a
didn't
lot of
really
crossover.
like. Yeah, Broken Note, I think, was the person that really
Love
powerfully like
Broken
bridged that gap. You know what I mean? Like, um, yeah, I mean, definitely seeing him play was like super influential as well. Actually, just being like, oh, I can take the two things that I love, like, and just sort of like smash them together and make this like amazing end result. And like, yeah, he's another person who has become a good friend actually after being like, a fan for quite a long time. And I think we booked him to play in London once, and like maybe like 10, 12 years ago or something like that. But yeah, Bangface was a good one. First time I went to that was kind of mind blowing. Hadn't really been to a festival before, and like my friend had shown me like Venetian snares and loads of other breakcore and stuff. And we were like,
Yeah,
he's playing at this thing in like 3 months. Should we go?
clearly you should go. Clearly.
Yeah. Oh, it was like the best choice. It was the best choice, definitely. And like that was just like such a mad, like multi-genre party. I mean, I think that does kind of neatly loop back to this kind of like, intentionally taking a really broad like scope when I'm thinking about what music I want to make, because I've always loved music, like all kinds of different music, and like certainly the first few years I was really getting into like kind of raves and parties and stuff. I was in London, and there was a lot of like these kind of multi-genre events where you could see like acid techno, and then the next guy is playing like breakcore, and then there's like a dubstep set, and then like a jungle set, and it's like all over the place kind of thing. So I think I always kind of wanted to be like, well, why would I just box myself into like one of these things when I kind of love all of them? And like actually, if you start sort of looking at genres as just like tools kind of thing, like a selection of just like a color palette, and you can just mix up those color palettes as much as you want to like get the result that you want. Like you don't have to be locked into like, oh, I'm making a dubstep tune, so it has to be like these elements. It's like, no, throw some like other stuff in there. Like, why not?
I like that you've answered the question on your own shirt.
Yeah, well, yeah. So this is a Slugwife shirt, right?
Yeah.
It's one of the new ones. Yeah, which was kind of like the ethos of the label as well. It's the same thing. It's like, what are genres really? Like, why take them so seriously when, if dance music culture is going well, they're changing all the time. So why treat them as this like carved into stone, like immutable thing when they're not? Like they're always getting like broken apart, mashed up, new things are coming in. Like, so why not be like part of that process rather than like trying to like pull it back into some kind of like conformity?
I mean, to me, I think a lot of that is, that fear of what other people think, and like the fear of being wrong, and it takes a lot of artists, especially emerging artists, a little bit to kind of face those demons. And then
Absolutely,
if you've got management that are telling you like, no, you need to carve out your own micro genre and like refine your brand, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
That's it. Yeah. I mean, I think there's more of that. So, I mean, like people don't really have managers here unless you're like super well established. I mean, I've never had a manager, right? Like, and like for a while it was like, oh, that would be cool. And who knows, maybe I'll meet the right person that kind of gets it or whatever. But I feel like there's maybe a little bit more, pressure in the States, certainly, to be like, okay, you have to have a manager from like day one. So you have this other person that's kind of,
if you don't have a manager, most agents in the US, they won't do it.
Right. Yeah. Right. So like, that kind of changes things a little bit, because you kind of inherently have somebody that's probably more inclined to be like, maybe it's best not to experiment because it makes me harder to sell what you do, which is true, right? I mean, it's not like making loads of different stuff is not like the fast route to being established.
Bad strategy.
It is. But then again,
like after it's like years, it's good.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of the thing, right? It's like, it takes a long time to then build up using that. But then the beauty of it is that like once you get to a point where you do have a bit of an audience and, you are managing to get booked more regularly and all these kinds of things, like, if you've always made a broad spectrum of stuff, that's what people expect. So, you're not going to end up in a situation where like, you're like, oh, I've been making this same micro genre for like 5 years and I'm sick of it. And like, oh, I'm going to do this different thing with my next EP. And then all of your fans hate it because they only really liked that thing anyway.
Yep.
So you kind of avoid that. So it's like, I mean, people can do whatever they want. There's no right or wrong answers, right? Like, and there's certainly no judgment either. Like
some of my favorite music are these micro genre artists.
Absolutely. Because there's a lot to be said for becoming like a master at something very specific. You know what I mean? But it just depends on what kind of person you are. Like I am way too easily distracted and way too easily bored to like stick with like one really narrow thing for like more than like a track or two in a row, honestly. Like, before I'm like, I just want to do like the polar opposite of that now,
Cool. Wow, this is these are all great answers. I love to hear a lot of this stuff when I was coming up. I had to change aliases because of this exact effect. I got signed like right out of high school. Like the second, third tracks I made came out on a record label, and I suddenly, I'm a teenager and I've got all these people in their 30s and 40s telling me I'm doing it wrong, and it just like really messed with my head, and I ended up having to completely change my brand and move on from being the fat conductor and doing breaks to being ill.Gates and doing whatever the hell I felt like. So.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes being forced into that switch isn't such a bad thing, because it allows you to kind of reset in a nice way. Like once you kind of know a little bit more of like what the hell you're doing,
Yeah, for real. So. Yep. Speaking of knowing what the hell you're doing, you've got this new EP, and I know you know what the hell you're doing now. I'm really, really excited to check it out. I've made a point of not listening to your new record, Elision, yet, so that...
Elision, yeah.
Oh, Elision. Okay, cool.
Yep.
What does Elision mean?
So it has like two meanings. Like one of them is like when you take two words and you kind of squish them together into a smaller word. So you could say like I'm, for example, rather than I am or whatever. But it also means taking two like kind of concepts, more like abstract concepts, and trying to like squeeze them into like one package kind of thing, and like
a lot.
Mix them up. Yeah, right. Yeah. So I kind of liked it, and I like the sound of it. I kind of always bounce off like. I want it to like have a nice meaning, but I also want it to like sound nice and look nice as well. It's like you don't want it to be some like absolute mouthful. So yeah.
Cool. All right. So is there anything else that I need to know before I dive in here, or should we just?
No, I think just get stuck in. Yeah, I mean the first track's kind of like an intro, and then it gets into the real like beatsy stuff. So, but yeah, I think
so should we start it at the top, or should I start which? I mean, which track should I listen to?
I think Epilogue, the second track.
Okay, cool.
Is a good one to start with, and then maybe we could pick one other after that or something. We can see how we go.
Okay, cool. Oh, I'm excited. Okay, so this is Epilogue by Seppa off of Elision, which you should all go get immediately. It's Elision. All right, here we go. could be dancing to this, and like, the kind of the big accents that you'd be moving to would feel like, they'd happen in the right spots, but yet like all the little in between accents are really kind of flowing in this erratic sort of a way. That was really cool.
Thanks, man.
Interesting that it's called Epilogue and it's so close to the beginning. But
I know, right?
Why is it called Epilogue?
I don't know. I think it had this kind of like finale feeling to it, but then I kind of like the idea of like not having it at the end, like having it like having that happen at the start, and it just kind of like already feels like the EP's kind of gone somewhere when you're like on the second track kind of thing. I mean, also I think I just kind of like the idea of like having a track called Epilogue that just isn't the last track. I thought that was kind of funny. So
yeah, it's definitely fun, and I mean, I could definitely see it. Like I said, at Monday morning on Monday, the best of all days that you only ever get at music festivals.
Yeah,
good old Monday. Cool. That was rad. I really, really like that. I like that it was like really kind of technical, but not like academic. I think a lot of the time when people are trying to incorporate like, really advanced production techniques or, ornate melodies, it can end up kind of feeling like, oh, this is like not something that like a normal person would put on and blast,
Yeah, right. I mean, like, so I have a master's in contemporary music, it's called, right? Which was like basically like not really specifically about electronic music. It was just like how like insanely far can you push the envelope and still call it music. So getting into like the really weird like and like fringes of like almost like performance art and stuff like that, which I really enjoyed, and I kind of like had a good time
Steve
doing
Reich
that
fan?
But like
Steve Reich fan?
Say again?
You a Steve Reich fan?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And like, all the kind of minimalism stuff, and there's a lot of cool shit that happened in the 20th century to sort of like expand our concept of music, and composition and shit like that. But I mean, the one thing that I kind of walked away from it with was like, I wanted to make music that like is like, if you're someone that's like a real like music head, you can find a lot of depth in it. But if you're also someone who is just a passionate music listener and doesn't care to understand or like, doesn't care about the technicalities of how it's made, you still should be able to enjoy it, because like the thing when you're kind of dealing with like academic music, especially, is like a lot of the time it makes no fucking sense until someone gives you a piece of paper that's like, oh, this is my like concept of like what I was trying to do, blah, 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 whatever. Yeah. And then you listen to it and it's like this just insane like sound thing that's just sort of like a cool thing to listen to, but it's not like you just stick it on in the car.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I was kind of like, okay, I want to like make like interesting music, but like at the end of the day, I think the most valuable thing about music is that it's something that we all share. And so I don't want to be like alienating people with music. I want to be trying to like bring them together, you know what I mean? And make something that can be enjoyed, whether you are a massive music nerd and you've listened to it 100 times, or whether you're someone who just got like dragged along to a show and you're hearing it for the first time. I want it to be like exciting and enjoyable and engaging for like everybody,
And it's, like a good joke. It's like if you have to explain it, is it really a good joke?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. You should just be able to take it on its own merits,
Super cool. Okay, well, Epilogue rocks. Which one should we check out next?
I think go for the one after it, Like That.
Like That? Okay.
Track 3, yeah.
All right, sweet. Here we go. This is Like That. Once again, the record is Elision, Elision, by our dear friend Alex Seppa. All right, let's check it out. Okay, first of all, it's 4 minutes and 17 seconds. Clearly 3 seconds too short.
You're so right. And it probably was 4:20 and then just got like trimmed in the final cut,
That's
what?
That's my only.
You know what? Cancel the release, man. Cancel the release. That's it. Take it off the store.
All right, here we go. Have you been playing these out at shows yet?
Yeah. So I played at Sonic Bloom a few weeks ago in Colorado.
That festival.
Yeah, and played, I think, all of these, actually. I think even the intro, I think, was the start to the set, so...
Cool. Did people lose their fucking minds, or what?
Yeah, so people were, like, actually being like, what is that? I like that tune, like, afterwards. So I was like, okay, that definitely needs to be on the EP.
And it's got that nice, handy, describable bumper sticker title.
Yeah, easy to find, right? Yeah. That's it. But yeah, it's kind of like, that's kind of like almost like opposite approach to Epilogue that we listened to first, in a way, where it's like, let's take like a really simple motif and just kind of like iterate it for 4 minutes or whatever, and just try and sort of like rework that and just have like a couple of sections that just sort of come back in a satisfying way.
Yeah, that one feels like it came out smooth, it feels like you didn't get too stuck on that one.
No, that was a quick one. Yeah, and it's quite fun making all those like a super wonky like detune top layers for that, like that like main hook or whatever. Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
I really dig that. I find too, like, the ones that come out, the ones that I feel like my fans like the most, it's always the ones where, like, at some point during the process, so it's like, was that too easy?
Yeah.
Like, and it's easy because you had a good idea, so you knew what to do next, and it flowed naturally, and you didn't have to sit there scratching your head and thinking that you're a terrible musician to get the track done,
Yeah, I mean, I think you can overthink it, you know what I mean? I think that one, the whole ethos and, thought process behind that track was like, let's make a dumb banger in a way, even though, like, it's not like, dumb, but it's like,
smart people need to get dumb too.
Well, yeah, I mean, it doesn't always need to be fucking like chin strokey, like thought provoking, like journeys, you know what I mean? But also it's like, it's just a
ornate little details.
And absolutely. You can still have that depth to it, but just build it around like a simple concept,
Yeah, really, really cool. So, can you take us through a little bit of like what your creative processes were like on this record? Like, how did you, where did you start the tracks? Let's just talk about one of them. Which one, can we talk about like that? Because we've just listened to it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think, so, I mean, well, to sort of, before we talk specifically about that, I mean, the process was like, I hadn't really made much music for a while because I had a new baby, and it was like, newborn babies are quite an intense experience. So there's not like a massive amount of time to be like noodling around making music, so I was kind of doing the other things that I do, like teaching and mastering and other bits and pieces that sort of like pay the bills, and a bit more like, okay, I can just do this in an hour or whatever. But like, we kind of got to a point where I was like, okay, I want to try and get a bit more creative again. So I started messing around trying to make some stuff, and I was like, I kept hitting a wall, and I was like, I just don't have enough sound. So I like banned myself from making music for like 2 or 3 weeks, I think. And just was like, every day I'm just going to make some sound design. So some days that might be a few hours. Some days it was like 30 minutes or, it's like whatever little bit of time I can get, I'm just going to like make some stuff, throw it in a folder, like, and then at the end, I'll like come back to it. So I think pretty much all of these tracks, apart from Fixed, which I wrote earlier, were made from like the same like 2 or 3 weeks of sound design, and just like kind of editing that together. So by the time I kind of got to writing like that, I had a kind of like backlog of like sound design stuff and drums and like other stuff I made. I got kind of into the habit of like, as part of the sound design process, rather than just making cool synthy noises, I'd like open Superior Drummer and like build a kit and then like rack it all out and just spend ages with like a loop, just kind of processing it and making it sound weird and cool, and then just like saving that group kind of thing. And I'd like bounce a copy out as well, so I could like quickly drop it into a project and see whether it works. But so I think the drums were kind of one of those where I just kind of dragged it in, maybe turned off a couple of reverbs and muted a couple of percussion instruments or whatever, and then like just came up with the the main hook with like just a bouncy kind of sub bass kind of sound. And then actually the layers, the super wonky detune layers were like just programmed into the project, I think. So yeah, just, you know, opening up. I think I pretty much used that Melda Sound Factory for like almost all of the synth stuff.
Big shout outs to Melda. They're my favorite.
Yeah.
I love them so much.
I picked that up like just before I started doing this EP and used it like in almost every single sound design session and in some of the projects, just like straight into the projects. And I still want to go back and keep using it. It's just so sick.
Have you messed
it
with
sounds
M
amazing
Drummer?
too. What's that?
M Drummer. Have you messed with M Drummer?
I have not messed with M Drummer.
It is very cool. There's a lot of things about it that are unique to M Drummer and not found in Addictive Drums or Superior Drummer. And I've been making a lot of my drum breaks using that. And it's got some really cool ways to handle the pattern sequencing where like you'll have, you know, like you kind of put where your main accents are in the pattern, and then it'll kind of like improvise the ghost notes and stuff like
that's cool.
Normal drummer would, and you can put like how much variation you want in the ghost notes, or do you want them exactly the same each time. And then one of the great things about it is it can spit out MIDI. So if you like, you can use the percussion sequencing engine on like an electronic kit or something somewhere else that's not just not just in there. And then the way you can like dial in the velocities and stuff, and the selective randomization is really cool. It's like, you know, they've clearly put a lot of time and thought into it. So I'm particularly into that one. But I think I'm
going to have to check that out.
Favorite Melda plugin has got to be M Wave Shaper.
Yeah.
That one?
Oh man, I mean, there's so much of it on this EP. It's crazy. It's just like everything, like pretty much runs through it at some point, you know. Drums, synth sounds, like all kinds of stuff. It's like, it's super sick. Yeah,
and that is free too. If you are out there and you're looking for it, if you go to the Melda free bundle, you can get M Wave Shaper and their oscilloscope, which are both indispensable to to my workflow. It's my favorite distortion ever, and it's free.
Yeah, I mean, that whole bundle is really good actually, and I think you can upgrade it for like not that much money to get like higher quality output or something like that. I can't remember.
I think it's rid of the ads, and you can resize the windows.
Right, yeah, but it's like it's not even that much. I mean, it's what you'd spend on like one plugin normally, you know, and you get like 15, I think, or something like that. So
just incredible. Big shout out.
They're making really good stuff, and but like a lot of this EP is the results of just like getting Sound Factory and just being like the realization of like, oh, now I have this modular environment with like every Melda plugin like ever like in it, and like there's some really cool like super nerdy stuff you can do in there, like separating the voices from the like main processing chain, so like you can do some cool things like apply distortion per voice and stuff like that, which you can't normally do.
Wicked. That's I love that sort of thing. Like I'm often making polysynths over on my modular where like each voice in a chord will be like a completely different chain, and I love the way that sounds, you know, and just like that little, or like if you have unsynced LFOs where each voice gets like a different instance of the LFO and all their drifts are a little bit different, you start getting that like Boards of Canada sound.
Definitely. They have this kind of amazing like analog mode in Sound Factory where it's just like you can turn it on, it's just like a dial, you know, 0 to 100%. It seems like it's basically just kind of doing that. It's just like knocking everything out of alignment slightly. That sounds really wicked. I mean, like those like kind of weird, spooky kind of chords and leads and stuff in Epilogue were like partly the result of like messing around with that kind of stuff, you know, of like that, adding that instability in and trying to make it feel a bit more like analogy and interesting rather than just like super clean and digital, you know.
Very cool. So let's say that you have a time machine and you can get a message back to yourself on day one of using M Sound Factory. What would you be like? No, you need to know this. Also, sell your Bitcoin or whatever, you know. Other than that message, but what would you tell yourself on day one of using M Sound Factory? What do you wish you knew?
read the fucking manual, because it's like it's opaque as fuck, like the way that it works. But that's an interesting question because it wasn't that long ago. So yeah, I think just to be honest, to just like actually learn, because it uses the same kind of like modulation interface as like all the Melda stuff does.
Yeah.
So to kind of to like actually just like figure that out, because it's not crazy complicated, but it's just like you have to click through a few things to find it. But then like within, I was talking about separating voices from the rest of the kind of effects chain, like in the voicing bit, you have like a different way of modulating stuff. I guess because it's being triggered per voice, it has to like kind of do it slightly differently, and it took me a really long time to like figure out what the hell was going on with that, and to like understand some of the idiosyncrasies of like, they have like one of the modulators is called an envelope, but like if you want like an attack that happens with like legato on, for example, so it only happens like for the first note of a string of notes or whatever, like you have to use the attack one instead. So there's like these weird little like idiosyncrasies to it that had me kind of like scratching my head for ages, that like once you know, you're like, oh cool, this just opens up like a world of possibilities now. I think also just like screw the presets and just hit that edit button and just like start just building something from scratch, because like, it's not that complicated. They're all the plugins are like familiar-ish. If you've ever seen any Melda stuff, the GUIs are pretty easy to understand, So yeah, rather than just like trying to like make sense of the hundreds of like presets, just like start loading in like a saw wave and a filter and a distortion and like a reverb and just see like how it works and just kind of do that, because that's how I got all of the coolest results out of it, for sure.
Sweet. So, other than M Sound Factory, what's like? Let's say you're working on a project and you're mostly using your sounds from your folder, but then you think of something that you're like, oh, I know what this project needs, and the sound is not in your folder. What are you reaching for to make that sound while you're working?
I've been using Vital quite a lot.
Sick.
Just as a, like, it would have been Serum for a while, I guess, but I find Vital's just a little bit more like fleshed out. There's just a couple of little things that are nice about it, like having two filters in the kind of like oscillator page is super useful. I think that just opens up a lot more like creative avenues. And like, there's just some little things about the GUI and stuff I find a little bit more intuitive. So yeah, that's probably the one where I'm like, okay, I like 100% know my way around this. So I know if I like have a clear idea of what I want to make, I know I can probably get it. But I tend to switch between quite a few, like Vital's fun, and Serum as well. I feel like they're kind of cousins really anyway. Faceplant, Pigments.
Yeah, Pigments is amazing, man. It just sounds so good. Like all this.
It does, yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, I feel like out of those, like Pigments is maybe like a little bit less flexible in some respects, but just the quality of the sounds that come out of it is amazing, definitely. And like, and to be honest, that's kind of part of the reason why I fell in love with Sound Factory as well, was just because like the sheer sound quality and the ability to just like up the quality on everything is like, it just sounds amazing,
I got a day one thing for Melda people, and also for Soothe users and any of these other plugins that have an offline quality mode when you're rendering, because many of the plugins will have like, what quality do you want while you're playing back, and then they allow you to change the quality for rendering, and that's handy because then it doesn't use so much CPU and only activates high quality mode when you're rendering. Well, I've got a not so fun fact, and that is that Ableton does not support that feature yet. So,
really interesting.
Yeah, not every DAW does. It's only available in certain DAWs. I believe it's available in Bitwig and Logic, but there are certain, so you got to look up if your DAW, because I was doing a comparison. I'm like, this sounds just the same. Like I did a null test and I'm like, there's no difference in quality. Why? And then I looked it up and I was like, no, all this time I thought I was rendering at high quality and I wasn't.
Yeah. I've definitely rendered some stuff out then thinking it was like higher quality. I mean, I'm pretty sure Bitwig can do it. Yeah, so I think Soothe, I think I had before I switched over. I mean, I've been like, Bitwig's been my like daily driver for almost 2 years now, I would say. Yeah. So yeah, it's good to know that like I haven't been cocking it up in that, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Cool. So, let's talk a little bit about like mixing, because that record,
Uh-huh.
your mixing is impeccable. You know,
Thanks.
it really feels appropriate for the
Mhm.
songs, and I think that's really, you know, in a world where there are no right and wrong answers,
Mhm.
really, you know, I think that that's always, you know, my objective is not to like, you know, make this mix from this other song only my song. I'm always like, what's appropriate for this song? Because yes, some
Mhm.
songs, it might be appropriate to try and hit a positive RMS value and just
Mhm.
have it be like the loudest, clippiest, crushiest thing ever. And then other songs, you know, it might be appropriate to leave it super dynamic. You know, people are
Mhm.
like, often like, oh, what levels should I set it at? And I'm like, it depends, you know?
Yeah.
So I feel like you've really kind of given the sounds what they want, and you've given them a mix that's really, you know, appropriate for the themes of the songs. It's appropriate for the vibe and everything. And I was wondering, you know, like how you go about achieving that. You know, how do you get a mix that feels right for the song like that?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a certain amount of just living with it for a while. So I mean, I'll make a track and I'll, you know, mix it a bit, and get it to a point where I'm like it's serviceable, like I could play that in a set or whatever. Um, and then I don't release stuff like straight away. I'll like sit on it for a while. So part of it is like giving yourself the time to really detach a bit from like the making part, so that you can be like, does that actually work or not? Because often you can't really notice that stuff straight away. But I think like a big part of it is the way that I kind of think about it in the abstract, I suppose, is like it's all about like conviction. So, and you can apply this to like the writing part as well, but it definitely applies to the mixing part too. When someone's listening to it, they have to be like convinced that this is how it's supposed to sound, in the same way that like on the musical side they have to be convinced like, oh, that was supposed to happen there, you know. So that's a kind of vague thing, but it's like at the end of the day, like you said, there's kind of no set rules. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to make people listen to it and be like, oh yeah, that makes sense, you know, like, oh, that, yeah, I'm totally convinced that this is how it's supposed to be.
I
You know,
always try to say that you know, when you really nail it as with a creative project, like really good art should feel obvious in retrospect,
yeah,
and you know, that's why so many people are like, oh well, you know, my kid could have painted that Jackson Pollock painting, and it's like,
mhm,
but your kid didn't, you know?
yeah,
It's like, it should feel like, of course that's that way, which in
yeah,
some ways kind of undermines what you've put into the project as an artist. And like, you know,
mhm,
creating something that feels that way out of nothing is actually quite difficult, but
yeah,
it should feel as though it's easy. It should feel as though it's obvious. It should feel as
yeah.
though it's intentional.
You don't want to be giving people an experience that like you know, where they keep getting pulled out of it, you know. So and that's something that you know, compositionally has to be dealt with, but also like mix wise has to be dealt with, because if you have like, I don't know, you know, one sound that just suddenly just like jumps out at you like in a really crazy way because it's just too loud in the mix or like whatever, like it kind of like snaps you out of the dream that you're in, you know. It kind of snaps you out of that like weird like kind of imaginary headspace that you're in while you're listening to that track. So that's like part of the process, is like, you know, you want to have these moments where like crazy things happen and you're like, oh
Well,
shit,
for
what's
example,
going on?
the first drop in like that was very much like that. Like you're
Right.
listening harder and harder as the intro sounds,
And then it's just like
there's that jarring moment, but
yeah,
it feels very intentional.
it feels, yeah, it's convincing, right? Like, and that's kind of the thing. It's just like it's a crazy thing to happen, you know. So I kind of say this to people a lot when I'm like just teaching them all of this stuff as well, of like, it's not about like, is this the right or wrong thing to do? It's like, can you sell it? Can you convince somebody that like that was supposed to happen there? Because you can do super weird stuff, mix wise, harmonically, whatever, like, and it works because you're able to like convince people that like that was supposed to happen there.
Well, it's like when you're a live performer and you have an accident and then you repeat it, then it becomes oh well, they meant to do that,
Exactly, yeah, exactly. It's the same kind of thought process, so that's kind of like the more like abstract kind of like philosophy behind it, I guess. I mean, from a more like kind of like getting the job done kind of side of things, I just kind of like endlessly like revise and tweak for like quite a while. I give myself quite a long time to deal with the mix. I'll like write the tracks, sort of put them to the side and listen to them and enjoy them, and like over that time kind of accrue like ideas of like, oh, I noticed when I listened like in the car that like this is just sounding totally wrong. This snare drum is way too quiet or something. I don't know. And then by the time I'm like, okay, now I know these tracks are going to go together on a release, like I'll start sort of actually sitting down and like messing with the mix and like bouncing out new versions of the mixes. And then like every time I do that, I chuck it on drive so I can just listen to it like anywhere. So I'll be like in the car, or I've like just got some earbuds, or like round somebody's house or whatever. And it's like, oh, let's just like stick this on and see how it feels here. Like, am I still convinced by it like here? Well, if the answer is no, what is it that's not working for me? Okay, I'll make a note of that and I'll go back and kind of change it. So I'm just kind of doing all these like endless kind of little iterations on that until I get to a point where I'm like, it feels consistent and I feel like wherever I play it, I enjoy it, because it gets to a point where it's like when you get it right, you stop thinking about the details and you go like, oh, I just like it now,
Yeah.
That's the point to get to. That's the idea,
One of my favorite little tricks for that is to change to whatever your computer's built-in speakers are.
Yeah,
because
right.
You do have another set of monitors hooked up.
Yeah,
which is not great.
and it's surprising how sometimes if you're only monitoring on like really good stuff, like good quality headphones, good monitors and stuff, sometimes you can miss some really like glaringly obvious stuff. Like I still keep like my older sets of headphones and stuff that I've used like to check stuff on, and it got to a point where I've got like a pair of Audis, like LCD XCs and some nice Genelecs and stuff, and I was like really struggling to be like, why are these like not quite translating properly? And then got out like £90 pair of like DT770s and put them on and was like, oh yeah, I can just hear exactly what the problems are now. So yeah, that's something as well. Like, yeah, just switch what you're listening to them on. Like if you're only listening to it on like one thing, you're going to just miss stuff. And then you'll be like, at some point in the future, you'll be like, how the fuck did I miss that?
I got a really good tip from Pedestrian Tactics, who's a fantastic producer. I don't know if you've heard of him, but
No, I'm not familiar. Yeah.
Really, he's a real producer's producer, like Mr. Bills goes a gushy wet one when he listens to Pedestrian Tactics. He's fantastic. But he has this technique where he's like, hey, sometimes your monitors are too clean, and any kind of playback in the real world is going to introduce some level of distortions, and how is that additional harmonic content going to affect your mix? And he'll put like a convolution on the master and then listen through different types of nearly dry convolutions, or you want to hear what it sounds like in an arena, and actually put that on to recreate different listening.
That's a great idea.
And I've done that a couple times and I've been like, that's a hot tip, Pedestrian Tactics.
That is a good idea. I'm definitely gonna have to try that.
Yeah, he's fantastic, man. I'm a big fan. Who are you geeked out on, producer wise? Like, who do you look at and you're like, oh, I'll never do anything that
good? That's a tough question. I'm not super up to date with electronic music generally. I just kind of float around in my own world. You know what I mean? So in terms of people where I'm just like, how the fuck? I mean, Eamon Tobin's always been one for sure, where it's just like his ability to squeeze the musicality out of anything is kind of amazing, and then just make like a super lush, like full mix that just like, I don't know, it just gives you an experience, you know what I mean? And it's like, obviously a big part of it is the music, but
it was like, I think my number one set of Shambhala this year was his 2-finger set, and he just like into all this IDM drum and bass stuff that we did not sign up for with a 2-finger set, and I loved every moment of it. He is
wicked, and he's always like, he's someone who I've always respected, because he also has never stood still. Like, he's always changed what he's doing. He's always like been trying to keep his eye on the future, and be like, oh, what's something that's at least new and interesting to me that I can explore. And he's never been afraid of like, taking a hard left turn for like the next album. Did
you check out the Figueroa album that he did?
No, I don't think so.
Oh my God. Okay, so for me, for 2020, it was between Apasha's Renaissance and the Figueroa album for Album of the Year 2020.
I'm sticking that one after this.
It's really cool. It's like basically like synthesized folk music kind of thing, where it's all like, because he uses that Kima system, which it's like a additive, it's like a kind of modular environment, like the Aphex Twin window licker voice and stuff. That was all Kima. Is like this outboard computer modular environment where you can like code your own devices, and it has this amazing additive synth engine. There's some behind the scenes of ESOM videos where you can see him like turning light bulbs into playable instruments and stuff, but there's no like pitch shifting artifacts, because it's like additive synth. I used to have one because of that, and I quickly found that editing a GUI that is in Comic Sans, it was just so visually offensive to me as a graphic designer that I had to bail. But it sounds wild, like, and you can do crazy stuff with it. That I feel like I was maybe a bit superficial with my
but you have to stare at it all the time. I mean, if it's like that is part of it,
So he's got all these riffs where it's like, it would be like physically impossible for a human being to play these riffs on like a stringed instrument, but there's like almost no drums, and it's all these acoustic instruments, and then these kind of weird psychedelic Beatles sounding vocals, and it's just like just amazing. No other record like it, and it is incredible.
Yeah, definitely. He's always been interesting and like well worth following, and just like a bit of an idol in that regard,
Oh yeah, and a sweetheart.
Trying to think who else. Yeah, definitely. I'm trying to think who else. I mean, there's certain people where I'm just like, like from a purely engineering standpoint, I'm just like, how the fuck do you get it that loud and get it to sound that good? And I have some answers, but yeah, I mean, people like, obviously Noisia, but also like Scope. I mean, his productions are just like absolutely insane. And I'm always kind of impressed by how
what Scope song should a listener put on if they've not heard Scope before?
So we have a couple of EPs on Slugwife from him. So let me have a little look. Which you can find. You can find the Slugwife Bandcamp if you just go music.slugwife.com, I believe. Let's see. Yeah, that's right. Which is where Elision's going to be as well. 12th of August is when it's coming out. But you can pre-order it from Friday the 5th, which is tomorrow for us. I don't know when you're putting this online, but yeah, I mean, like the most recent one from Scope that we put out, EP was called Slapback. Crumb Chaser is madness. 1 o'clock. I mean, the whole thing is sick. Yeah, the whole thing is sick.
I haven't heard it yet. I'll go.
Yeah, go give it a look. You can just listen to the track straight off Bandcamp to check him out as well. So but yeah, I mean, his stuff's always like really crazy. And then like, yeah, I mean, I think also in terms of people that, to be honest, most of my favorite musicians and producers are people that I kind of know, I guess, because you kind of get to know people that you share a similar passion for doing similar stuff.
Yeah, shout them out.
Broken Note is a massive one still. I mean, his last album that came out on Slugwife and in a few other places, Exit the Void, is like a real masterpiece, I have to say. I mean, if you want to talk about like mixing stuff to just give all the sounds and the tracks exactly what they're supposed to have, like, I mean, it's an absolute masterclass in that. I mean, he spent like years literally like mixing that and like fine tuning it, tweaking it. Like, I mean, it was kind of 10 years in the making, that album.
Wow.
And like the level of like rawness is like totally raw and just intense and just feels like the whole thing's just going to like rip itself apart at any moment. But at the same time having like so much control that like when you hear it, like especially out of like a sound system, like a good sound system, it's just like, yeah, it's insane. It's just totally insane. Like, I would recommend it. If you ever get the chance to see him play, like, do it, because like that shit sounds absolutely bananas. And yeah, I mean, you'll be like broken by the time you come out the other side, and it'll be totally worth it.
Sweet. Very cool. Word. All right. So what is the music that you enjoy that people would be surprised that you listen to that?
So, I think probably if I think about the thing that fits that category the most, there's an album from, are you familiar with Caitlin Aurelia Smith?
Yeah, I love it.
Right.
I'm a modular person, so
right. Yeah, so you're familiar, right? So that album. Like, I'm not wild about all of her stuff, but that particular album is like, I don't know, I can just listen to that over and over again. I must have listened to it like 100 times now. It was just something that I was like, when I got my US visa and started touring loads, I was like, what do I like need to have on my phone? And that was definitely one of them. And it's very like gentle and like has all these kind of like whimsical little vocal bits in it. And, you know, a lot of obviously like kind of, sort of modular-y synth work and kind of, you know, sequence kind of stuff or whatever. But like, I like the way that she blends her vocals, which have this almost kind of like Tom York-esque vibe where you never really quite know what she's saying, but you also don't really care because it just sounds really kind of, yeah, Mr. sort of ethereal and like pleasing. But then with the synth work and also kind of like wind instruments, and it's just a really interesting kind of journey. It's like something that you can just kind of stick on at the start and just like let it run out to the end, and it's always like a cool experience. So yeah, that would be the one that springs to mind, I think.
Sweet. So you mentioned that you had a master's in music. Can you tell us one or two things that you learned that you're like, oh yeah, that's why I got the master's in music, to learn that thing?
Oh, that's a good question. It was a long time ago. Yeah, I mean, I don't think like, because the thing is, it was dealing with such like esoteric like approaches to music that I think it just kind of just completely dissolved my borders of like, this is how music is. You know what I mean? So yeah, I mean, I'm pretty, yeah, I don't know. How do I sum up like one trick or tip? I mean, yeah.
Or it could have been an insight or something you unlearned.
Yeah, I think it kind of just taught me that there's no wrong. There's nothing wrong like that you can do. Like anything that you make can be like musical, I suppose. Any sound that you make. The most important thing is that you're delivering an experience to somebody. But like, yeah, there are no wrong notes. There's no set structure. There's no like, those boxes are all things that like you can choose to engage with or not, kind of thing. Now having kind of like totally just, you know, smashed all the boxes to pieces and thrown all the bits away for like a year or so. I then kind of was like, the insight that kind of gave me was not like, oh, I'm just going to do like crazy sound art stuff and just like whatever and let's see what happens. It was that those boxes serve like a super useful function actually, because like often it's much easier to be creative within like some kind of constraint. But once you've kind of like gone outside of them and you can see them for what they are, then you get to like build your own box, you know? So you don't have to be like trapped by a preordained thing that just kind of got given to you, you can kind of like, dismantle it and combine together ideas that you, or, kind of constraints that you find appealing, and then like work within those, and like no one else can tell you that. Like you just have to kind of find that for yourself, I suppose. So yeah, it was kind of like a bit of a like brain melting journey into just like kind of, I don't know, flying out beyond the borders and then kind of like coming back in again and just kind of reassessing the way I was thinking about music, I guess.
So that's a great answer. And I really like that you've been intentional about creating your own box. Can you tell us about your box? Do you have like a style manifesto that you're currently working with or anything to that effect?
Um, yeah, I mean, I guess I often when I'm writing tracks, I'm trying to think about like uh, combining like, okay, so let's say um, yeah, let's say like that for example, which is not super out there or whatever, but like I kind of knew that I wanted to like create myself a box for that track that was quite confined, so that I didn't just end up going off into sort of like nerdy noodle land kind of thing. So I was like, okay, it's going to be a kind of half step kind of vibe, but with loads of percussion like fills. And like I have to that from the get go, I was like, I know that's how I want the drums to kind of work. I don't know exactly what they're going to be, and I don't know exactly what the pattern's going to be, but like I know that I want to stick like rhythmically within that kind of field. Um, and I also knew sort of aesthetically, I wanted it to be quite sort of like in your face, I suppose, and not have too much kind of like whimsical stuff like in the actual drop kind of thing. So when I kind of ended up getting to the final end of the composition, I was like, okay, a nice contrast is actually to have some like little bits of like pads and things like that like can be an intro and breakdown and outro or whatever, because they intentionally contrast that like kind of upfront bit. But I was like, yeah, I want things to be like quite dry. I want things to be just be like really, everything's just like trying to like just jump on you. Um, so yeah, I kind of had that kind of intention, I suppose, with it from like very very early on in writing it. Um, and I wanted to like sort of borrow some little motifs. So it's like 150 BPM. So I was like, okay, I want to borrow some motifs from kind of like a little bit from like kind of trap and drill and stuff like that, but like not be too indebted to like the actual musicality of those genres, but more just like the rhythmical side of it. So yeah, I mean, I kind of do it for like each track almost, of just like, okay, what are my like parameters that I'm kind of working with, and what kind of experience am I trying to make as well? Like, Epilogue is a very different experience that I was trying to create, where I was like, I want this to be a like a narrative track. I want this to be like telling you in a very abstract way some kind of story where you start in a certain place, and it kind of has all its twists and turns, and it shocks you and surprises you in places, and then other places kind of gives you what you want. But like in the same way that if you're like writing a novel or something, that's how you would structure a story. So that was like a big part of the process for that one. But for like that, I was like, no, I want it to be like a dance floor tune. So it doesn't need to be that like complicated. Actually, what I need to do is I need to find essentially two ideas and just repeat them a few times and just like iterate them in the right way, so it's taking a very like basic kind of approach to that instead. So yeah, I guess it's always like constructing some kind of like closed system in a way where I'm like, I could decide to break out of it, but I find that I'm most creative when I have those walls built around me that I can kind of bounce off of.
Very cool. Very cool. So do you have like a recipe for a Seppa track, or I mean, I'm sure you have many recipes, but do you have like a recipe that you follow? Like what are the sequences of steps?
Yeah, I mean, usually I'll start with the drums. I mean, discounting making sounds and stuff before that. But when I actually like open the project to make a track, I'll start getting some drums in first, because I just kind of feel that if you're making a drum-driven track, then like they are the things that you're kind of going to hang everything else around. As much as, it's a two-way conversation, like they are also reinforcing what your other sounds are doing as well, ultimately. But I just find that a lot of the time, if I can at least get like a good kind of basic kit sorted, then it becomes much easier to start just throwing sounds in and seeing what happens, So usually I'll build up a kit, have like a basic kind of like really basic loop like programmed in. And once I'm happy with how that like sounds, then I'll start grabbing other things, could be basses, could be other stuff, and just like dropping bits of audio in and just chopping things up. And then changing the pattern of the drum loop to try and reinforce the cool things that I find in the other sounds, I suppose. So quite often be like, let's say chopping up like a long bass stem, like recording or whatever. And there might be like rhythmical things in that are quite fun, like and slightly off the grid and whatnot. So it's nice to then like be like, oh, that's a cool thing to repeat, or it would be nice if I reinforce that a little bit with what the drums are doing, kind of thing. So I'm sort of just trying to like pull enough stuff into the project that I can find a few really good nuggets that just all of a sudden just like kind of lock together into something where I'm like, oh, that's the thing, like that's it, that works, like I can listen to that over and over again. And then from that point, it's like once I've kind of got that, I'll maybe try and do that a few more times. Like once you've found like a good palette of sounds, you can then go, all right, let's start the process again. But now I kind of have like a palette to work from. So I'll make a few more ideas and, kind of flesh that out. And then once there's like a few solid ones, I will start to think about, okay, maybe this one can come first and then this one. And then maybe we go back to the first one, or we go to a third one, or, whatever, start kind of like collaging it together and thinking about it more as like a piece of music rather than just like a series of loops, I suppose. And then usually that's enough to kind of do like maybe first drop and a breakdown and, grab some bits to throw on, like put a basic intro on it, because when you're kind of like getting to that point, it's important to give yourself like a run up when you're like listening to a drop or something to like really understand how it works, and then usually from that, like it's like I'm like, okay, now I want to maybe develop the heavier part, whether it be a second drop or just kind of like keep it going into something else. But usually by that point you have a few like motifs and kind of core ideas that you can then sort of try and iterate on and make like an altered version, so that you can kind of work with the fact that people are familiar with that first bit, that first core idea, but you can kind of like mess with their expectation a little bit by just like flipping it on its head some way, changing the way it's done, whether that be maybe doing a similar motif with a different instrument, or like changing the pattern slightly so it starts the same but finishes differently, or there's a million different ways that you can kind of mess with that. So yeah, I guess that's kind of the process in a way. I mean, I kind of go through the whole thing actually, and I have a course on Producer Tech.
That was actually where I was going with the next question. So tell us about the wonderful Seppa course that you should all go.
So if you go to producertech.com and you just search for Seppa, you can find a few things that I've done for them. But there's one main one, which basically is me going through this whole process that I just like talked about, which is called Advanced Bass Music Production Techniques 2. Very important, because there is a first one, but like the second one is much better, and you don't need to watch the first one, so don't worry about that. And that basically just goes through the whole process where we make a few sounds, we start like building a track, and then we go all the way through to having some kind of like finished sort of tune, because I could just I made it in 2020, and just kind of was like, there's so many courses on like very specific bits, like, which I've done some of as well. Like there's another one coming out soon, which is the Advanced Guide to Synthesis, where I'm messing around with synths like Vital and Serum and showing how to make like different kinds of useful sounds. And there's another one that I've done called Making Samples Your Own on Producer Tech as well, which is basically like how can you make cool sound design from your sample library that you already have, so you can kind of take those samples and do cool stuff to them and get like new things that are just yours, but I was like, there's not really that many courses that just actually show you the whole process. It's like, it's often very split up, and I think for people that are really trying to get to grips with like, okay, I can okay, I understand how to use Ableton or whatever now a bit. I understand how to use a synth a bit. I understand how to program some drums a bit. But like, how do I actually go from like nothing to like a track? Like, what is the actual whole process? So that's kind of what that course is basically. It's just trying to give people like a ethos to follow, I guess.
Yeah, that's really essential, man. I mean, that's always been kind of where I've put my educational energy as well, because I mean, there's so many educators out there that may have like detailed technical knowledge about this or that thing, but like you go check their discography and it's like 3 tunes that suck, and you're like,
Yeah.
oh well, why am I taking advice from this person? Like,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, when you have someone who's as talented as you showing how the process fits together, I mean, that's indispensable. So, you know,
Yeah, I mean,
I don't think that for people.
I mean, I don't think there should be any secrets. Like, I think the world is a better place with like more music, and I also just think that music is such a like making music is such a personal thing that, you know, someone could like I could show somebody everything that I know, but we're not going to make the same music because we're different people. We have different tastes. We have different experience. You know, our brains are literally wired differently. You know what I mean? So I think that like all of these techniques and all of these kinds of like processes should be shared, because then it allows people to like get to where they want to go quicker and make more good music that we can all enjoy. Because I mean, I remember when I was getting into it, like, I mean, it was like pulling teeth trying to find like useful information on how to make electronic music, you know,
especially for YouTube. Oh my god, it was like I used to have to go bribe people with weed at the guitar store and stuff. Like, just come over to my house. I need to know what ASIO is.
Yeah, that's it. It's amazing that there's all this stuff out there now. So, you know, I'm just like happy to like contribute a little bit of know-how here and there to like help people along.
Hell yeah. So I'm sure that anyone who's made it this far would like to follow you and get on your mailing list and stuff. I'm sure that happens when they buy a record at Bandcamp. Yep. But are there any like cool free things that you give away where people can get a free thing to sign up for your email list or anything? Or any?
No.
Okay. So it's a place but what you sign up.
Just sign up. Yeah, I mean, basically the easiest thing to do if you want to just keep track of like my new music and stuff that's coming out. If you go to seppa.bandcamp.com, that will like pull up my page, and I think let me just load it up so I can double check this is definitely how it works. But there is like a follow button on there. Yeah, if you kind of depends on mobile, it's down the bottom. On like your computer, it'll be off to the side. But there's a follow button, so even if you don't want to buy something or can't afford to or whatever, you can just hit that and it will put you on my mailing list through there. I sort of send stuff out through Bandcamp like periodically and just kind of keep people updated. But you can find me on like, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all of the usual stuff. SoundCloud. I do try and put like from each release, I'll upload a full track or two onto SoundCloud so you can just like check it out as well. Because, I think it's important for people to just have a little bit of access there. As well. So yeah, I mean, I'm not like super, I'm not a massive poster, I've got to say, but I do like make sure that people are aware of like the main stuff that's happening, Yeah, and actually, if you're in America and you want to come see me play, I'm going to be playing a few shows later on this month as well. So I'm in Austin on the 24th of August, Grand Rapids 25th of August, Charlotte on the 26th, Tempe, Arizona on the 27th, and then Denver on the 30th.
Oh,
so if you're
Denver,
yeah, always back at the Black Box for Tuesdays for that one. So so yeah, if you're near any of those places, come see me play. A couple of the shows are with KLO as well, which is pretty fun. The Charlotte and the Tempe ones, so that should be really fun. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be playing definitely the stuff off the EP, and there's a bunch of other unreleased stuff that I'm figuring out what to do with as well. So. And a few of the classics, I'm sure.
Wicked. Okay, so do you have a message for any of your fans? Do you have a message for the fans? Anything you want to say to them?
I mean, just thank you for listening to my music. I mean, I really appreciate it. I get to do this as my job, which is like living the dream for me. So, I'm super grateful every day that people love my music, and that like maybe I get to give people like the kind of experience that I've received from other musicians that I love. So yeah, thanks to everybody, really. I guess that's about it.
Wicked. All right. Well, thank you so much for taking time.
Thanks for having me.
Precious commodity when you're a new dad and a busy musician. So I really appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure, honestly. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, I appreciate it a lot.
All right. Lots of love, everybody. Make sure you follow Seppa. You're at Seppa UK. It's not Seppak. It's
I think Seppa UK on Twitter, and you can find everything else from there, I'm sure.
Wicked. All right. Well, lots of love, everybody. Thank you so much for watching, for listening, for supporting, and I hope you go out there and really listen to that new Seppa EP, Elision.
I hope you enjoy.
Whew. Pretty dope. All right. Peace out.
Sick. Nice one.